Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. She laughed at human legends. Until one appeared right before her eyes. Professor Nix Vera flicked her third eyelid in annoyance as the projection flickered again. Can someone please fix this antiquated system? She waved one of her forearms dismissively, the golden scales along her forearm catching the light. How am I supposed to debunk human nonsense when I can't even show proper evidence? The classroom of 32 graduate students, representing 17 different species from across the Galactic Union, shifted nervously. Nobody wanted to be the target of Professor Vor's legendary impatience. Sorry, Professor, a timid sentry with blue tendrils hurried to adjust the holographic display. The system keeps rejecting the human data packets. They're unusually compressed. Of course they are, Nix sighed dramatically. Humans and their obsession with efficiency, as if cramming 5 exabytes into a standard Union data crystal somehow makes up for their biological limitations. The projection stabilized, displaying footage of a human lifting what appeared to be a ground transport vehicle to rescue a trapped juvenile of their species. Now, behold Exhibit 113 in our continuing study of human exaggerated historical records. She pronounced each word with exaggerated precision, her translator implant adding a perfect layer of sarcasm. This so-called news report claims an average human male with no genetic modifications whatsoever lifted a 2-ton vehicle using, and I quote, adrenaline and determination. The class erupted in laughter. Talia in the front row fluttered her wing membranes in amusement. Even a full-grown Dorvian couldn't manage that, and they evolved on a high-gravity world. Precisely, Talia, Nix nodded, pleased that at least some of her students were developing critical thinking skills. Humans come from a relatively standard gravity planet, have no significant muscle density advantages, and possess an embarrassingly vulnerable skeletal structure. Yet their historical records are filled with these absurdities. She advanced to the next slide, showing a human swimming across a massive body of water. This one claims a human female swam 95 kilometers in open ocean for 29 consecutive hours without sleep, significant rest, or technological assistance. Nix snorted, a sound her species used to indicate disbelief. Their respiratory system doesn't even have backup pathways. One nostril blockage and they're practically incapacitated. A serious-looking Dravakian raised a clawed appendage. But Professor, what about the documented adaptability of human physiology? Couldn't some of these accounts have a basis in nonsense? Nix interrupted, her scales flashing an irritated orange. I've spent 27 cycles studying human culture. I've visited their home world 3 times. I've even endured their peculiar smells and social rituals to interview their elders. Trust me when I say humans are masters of only one thing, turning mundane accomplishments into grandiose legends. She closed the presentation with a flourish of her primary writing hand. Which is precisely why the Union Scientific Council has approved my extended research grant. Next cycle, I'll be stationed at Junction Outpost K9, where I'll document actual human capabilities without the contamination of their self-aggrandizing myths. The classroom buzzed with excitement. Junction K9 was notoriously difficult to access for academic purposes. Yes, very impressive, Nix said, not bothering to hide her smugness. By this time next year, I'll have published the definitive work on human limitations. Let's see them exaggerate their way out of empirical observation. As the students filed out after class, Nix remained staring at the frozen image of the human supposedly performing the impossible feat. She tapped her pointed chin thoughtfully. Just once, she muttered to herself, I'd like to see one of these legendary humans, just to confirm what I already know. They're nothing special. Nothing special at all. How wrong she was about to be. 3 months later, Nix stepped off the transport shuttle onto Junction Outpost K9 with all 4 arms full of research equipment. The station's artificial gravity felt slightly off-calibrated, for multiple species but perfect for none. Welcome to K9, Professor Vara, a cheerful voice chirped from behind her. Need help with those cases? Nix turned to face an Eridian station officer, his purple skin glowing faintly under the station's ambient lighting. His name badge read Lieutenant Pax. I'm perfectly capable, thank you, she replied promptly, dropping one of her scanner cases. Blasted. Lieutenant Pax caught the case with surprising dexterity for someone with only 2 arms. No offense intended, Professor. Station protocol, we assist all new arrivals regardless of limb count or professional status, he winked one of his 4 eyes. Fine. Nix surrendered 2 cases. Where's my research lab? Level 7, Section C Prime Real Estate, you've got a viewport overlooking the asteroid mining operations. Very scenic, especially during shift changes when the harvester drones return. Nix followed the officer through the station's curved corridors. K9 had been constructed inside a hollowed-out asteroid at the intersection of 3 major trade routes, yet remained notably distant from Earth-controlled space. Perfect for her research. So, she ventured, how many humans typically pass through K9, Lieutenant? Pax thought for a moment. Maybe 1 or 2 per standard year, maybe. They're not banned or anything, just not much reason for them to come out this far. Last human we had was a trade inspector about 7 months ago. Spent most of their time complaining about our coffee substitute. Excellent. Nix couldn't contain her enthusiasm. That's precisely why I selected this location. I need to observe humans in isolation, away from their collective support structures. Their pack behavior skews data. The lieutenant gave her a curious look. You sound like you're studying dangerous predators instead of Union citizens. I'm studying the gap between their legends and reality, Nix corrected. Humans constantly embellish their capabilities. Did you know they have historical records claiming their early space explorers repaired orbital vehicles with adhesive sheets they call duct tape? Preposterous. They reached her lab, a spacious chamber with research stations, sleeping quarters, and as promised, a magnificent viewport. Nix immediately began arranging her equipment, her scales shifting to a focused blue-green. Station Commander Krex has scheduled a welcome briefing at 1900 hours, Lieutenant Pax informed her. There are currently 342 residents on K9, representing 28 species. The commissary serves meals compatible with 43 different biochemistries, and recreation facilities are available on Level 3. Yes, thank you, Nix waved dismissively, already absorbed in calibrating her primary research terminal. Lieutenant Pax paused at the door. One more thing, Professor. Your research authorization mentions observation of human specimens, but without any humans aboard. Nix smiled, revealing rows of small pointed teeth. Don't worry, Lieutenant. I've arranged everything. The Union science vessel, Curiosity, will be conducting a mineral survey in this sector next month. They have exactly 1 human crew member who's agreed to participate in my study. Under carefully controlled conditions, of course. Of course, the lieutenant nodded. Well, good luck with your research. K9 may be remote, but we pride ourselves on being uneventful. You won't find any excitement to distract from your work here. As the door slid shut behind him, Nix muttered to herself, perfect. No distractions, no human cultural contamination, and 1 isolated subject for observation. Time to debunk some legends. The station's warning klaxon chose that exact moment to blare to life. Attention all personnel, unscheduled vessel approaching docking bay 3. This is not a drill. Security teams to your stations. Nix dropped the calibration rod she'd been holding. 3 minutes on station and already something interesting. She hurried to the viewport, pressing her face against the transparent alloy to glimpse the approaching ship. It was tiny, barely larger than a standard escape pod, with scorch marks along its hull and what appeared to be hasty patch repairs on one side. Definitely not a military vessel, or even a proper transport. The markings were human. Nick squinted, her specialized eyes zooming in on the faded lettering, Leon Salvage. A human, she muttered incredulously. Here. Now. Her communications implant buzzed. Professor Vara, it was Commander Krex, please report to Docking Bay 3 immediately. Your expertise is required. 15 minutes later, Nick stood in the station's quarantine chamber alongside Commander Krex, an imposing Taurian with ridged forehead plates, watching through shielded glass as medical officers examined the ship's sole occupant. Marcus Leon, Commander Krex rumbled, reading from a data pad. Independent salvage operator. Claims his jump drive malfunctioned during a routine scavenging operation, sending him off course. Emergency systems apparently brought him to the nearest station, us. Convenient, Nick said skeptically, studying the human. Marcus Leon was underwhelming, average height for his species, around 1.8 m in their measurements, with an unremarkable build, light brown skin, short black hair, and what appeared to be several days' worth of facial hair. He wore a standard vacuum suit with numerous non-regulation modifications and patches. Currently, he was smiling pleasantly at the medical officer scanning him, a Hilorian whose tentacles were methodically checking for contaminants. Why am I here? Nix asked, not taking her eyes off the human. You're our resident human expert, Commander Krex said simply. I need to know if anything about this situation seems suspicious. Nix snorted. Besides the cosmic coincidence of a human appearing precisely when I arrived to study humans. Yes, besides that. She studied Marcus more carefully. He was now laughing at something the medical officer had said, his body language relaxed, shoulders slightly slouched. No signs of unusual muscle density, no observable implants, no indication of genetic modification. He appears to be an entirely ordinary specimen, Nix concluded. Possibly even below average physical condition for their species. Those arms couldn't lift a Galacien fruit, let alone a transport vehicle. The human suddenly looked directly at the observation window, despite it being designed as one way, and gave a small wave. Nix involuntarily stepped back. Can he see us? She demanded. Impossible, Commander Krex assured her. Must be a coincidence. Marcus Leon was cleared for entry 20 minutes later. Up close, he smelled like machine oil and some kind of plant-based beverage, coffee, Nix recalled. His handshake was firm but unremarkable. Thanks for the rescue, he said with an easy smile. My NAV system went completely haywire. Lucky you folks were nearby. Junction K9 is hardly nearby anything, Nix pointed out suspiciously. Well, everything's relative in space, right? Marcus shrugged. They tell me repairs might take a couple weeks. Guess we'll be seeing a lot of each other. Professor Vara Nix. I study human culture. Perfect. Marcus grinned wider. I'm pretty human. Study away. Commander Krex assigned the human temporary quarters on level 5, deliberately distanced from sensitive areas, and Nix returned to her lab, both irritated and secretly thrilled. Her subject had arrived early and under natural conditions rather than the controlled environment she'd planned. Completely ordinary, she reminded herself. Nothing special at all. That night, the station's gravity briefly failed in 3 separate sections simultaneously for exactly 7.3 seconds each. Nick stared at the data readings, her scales flashing an irritated orange. The gravity fluctuations made no sense. She had spent 3 days analyzing them, and the pattern defied all logical explanation. They originated from completely separate systems. No connection, no shared power conduits, no evidence of tampering, she muttered, pacing her lab. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Enter, she called, expecting Lieutenant Pax with her daily station update. Instead, Marcus Leon strolled in, munching on a protein bar clearly not designed for human consumption. Morning, Professor. Or is it evening? Hard to tell in space, right? He chuckled at his own joke. Nix's third eyelid flicked. That food isn't compatible with your digestive system. Marcus glanced at the purple bar. This? Nah, it's fine. My stomach can handle pretty much anything. One time on Proxima B, I ate this thing that looked like a cross between an octopus and a pineapple. Tasted terrible but didn't kill me. Impossible, Nix declared. Human digestive systems lack the necessary enzymes to process century proteins. You'll be violently ill within the hour. Bet you a week's worth of research assistance I won't, he grinned, taking another deliberate bite. Before Nix could respond, her communication implant buzzed urgently. Commander Krex's voice sounded strained. Professor Vara, report to Maintenance Section 12 immediately. Bring your environmental suit. 20 minutes later, Nix floated in zero gravity alongside Marcus, who had inexplicably been invited by Commander Krex, staring at a catastrophic coolant leak. The liquid nitrogen had frozen into crystalline patterns across an entire corridor. Beautiful but deadly. 3 maintenance workers were trapped behind the frozen section, their oxygen supplies dwindling. Atmospheric seals engaged, but we can't risk a thermal melt, Commander Krex explained. The sudden temperature change could crack the hull. We need to physically break through and extract our people. Where's the emergency equipment? Nix asked. That's the problem, Lieutenant Pax replied grimly. The equipment is stored inside that section. Standard procedure is to access emergencies from within, not to break in from outside. Marcus had been unusually quiet, studying the frozen barrier. How thick is it? He asked. Approximately 30 centimeters at the thinnest point, Lieutenant Pax answered. Nearly solid nitrogen ice. And the trapped crew has how much air left? 17 minutes. Marcus nodded, making a decision. I can get through it. Everyone turned to stare at him. Impossible, Nix declared automatically. The ice would shatter standard cutting tools, and even if you had proper equipment, it would take hours. Don't need tools, Marcus began removing his environmental suit's outer layers. What are you doing? Nix demanded. The temperature beyond that seal is minus 198 degrees Celsius. Yeah, that's pretty cold, Marcus agreed casually, but I only need about 2 minutes. Commander Krex looked skeptical but desperate. Let him try. Marcus, now wearing only the thin underlayer of his environmental suit, approached the frozen barrier. Might want to stand back, he suggested. What happened next made Nix question her sanity. Marcus simply punched the ice, not once, but repeatedly, with methodical precision. His exposed fists should have frozen instantly. Instead, they cracked the surface, sending crystalline shards floating in the zero-G environment. How is he? Nix began but couldn't finish the thought. With each impact, Marcus' breath fogged more heavily around his face. His skin turned an alarming shade of red, but he didn't slow down. Sweat, actual liquid sweat in these temperatures, beaded on his forehead before freezing into tiny ice crystals that drifted away. After 90 agonizing seconds, he had created a hole large enough to squeeze through. Going in, he called back, his voice strained but determined. Be ready to pull them out. Core temperature must be dropping dangerously, Nix whispered to Lieutenant Pax. Humans can't survive this. Before Lieutenant Pax could respond, Marcus reappeared dragging an unconscious Valoran technician. 1 down, 2 to go, he gasped, his lips now an unhealthy blue color. 2 more trips into the frozen hell, and all 3 workers were safely extracted. Marcus collapsed immediately afterward, shivering violently. Get him to medical, Commander Krex ordered. Priority treatment in the medical bay. Nix watched in astonishment as the human's vital signs stabilized with alarming rapidity. The medical officer, Dr. Trill, seemed equally baffled. His core temperature dropped to levels that should have caused cardiac arrest, Dr. Trill reported, studying the readings. Yet his organs show no sign of damage. It's as if his body simply adapted. Impossible, Nick said weakly, the word losing its conviction. Marcus, overhearing, gave her a tired smile. You say that a lot, Professor. Later that evening, Nix discovered Marcus had suffered no ill effects whatsoever from the Zenteri protein bar. Nix found herself spending more time observing Marcus Leon than she cared to admit. For the next week, she documented a series of inexplicable occurrences. The human correctly predicted a micrometeor shower 12 hours before the station's advanced detection systems. He somehow understood a Krellin engineer despite her translator being broken, a language with tonal qualities beyond human hearing range. During a routine power fluctuation, he manually recalibrated a delicate quantum stabilizer, a device that required six-fingered precision that humans simply didn't possess. Each incident defied Nix's understanding of human capabilities, yet none were quite dramatic enough to be conclusively impossible. She found herself making increasingly elaborate justifications. Coincidence. Lucky guessing. Hidden technology. She sighed. You're reaching, she muttered to herself, reviewing her notes. Looking for legends where there are none. Then came day 8. The station-wide alert jolted Nix awake at 3 o'clock hours. Red emergency lighting bathed her quarters as Commander Krex's voice boomed through the communication system. This is not a drill. Containment breach in Research Section Delta. Unknown biological agent detected. All personnel initiate Emergency Protocol 7 Delta immediately. Repeat, this is not, the transmission cut off abruptly. Nix scrambled from her sleeping platform, heart racing. Research Section Delta housed experimental bio-samples from 17 different worlds. A containment breach could mean anything from mild respiratory irritation to station-wide extinction. Her communication implant buzzed urgently. Professor Vara. It was Lieutenant Pax, his voice tight with fear. Report to emergency control immediately. Your xenobiology expertise is needed. Emergency control was chaos. Screens displayed spreading contamination zones in pulsing red. Commander Krex stood at the central console, his usually imposing figure now tense with strain. Vara, finally, he barked when she entered. The containment system in Delta failed catastrophically, all 3 backup measures simultaneously malfunctioned. We've sealed the affected sectors, but the agent is spreading through the ventilation system faster than we can lock it down. Nix scanned the data readouts, her blood running cold. Is that Curillian bloom spores? Who authorized those on station? They're Class 9 restricted. That's not important now, Commander Krex snapped. Can they be neutralized? Nix's scales faded to a sickly gray. Theoretically, yes. Extreme heat, over 900 degrees, will destroy the spores. But that would require venting affected sections to space and superheating them with plasma bursts. Impossible, Lieutenant Pax interjected. We have 37 personnel trapped in those sections with failing environmental suits. They'd die instantly. Nick stared at the spreading contamination. If we don't stop it, everyone on this station dies within 6 hours. Curillian spores attack neural tissue across all known species. There's no cure, no treatment. The command center doors slid open. Marcus Leon walked in, looking like he'd dressed in a hurry. I heard the alarm. What's happening? Commander Krex merely pointed to the screens. Well, that's not good, Marcus remarked with infuriating casualness. Those are Curillian spores, right? Nasty stuff. Nix glared at him. This is a restricted area during emergencies, human. You need to return to your quarters and prepare for possible evacuation. Marcus ignored her, studying the station schematics. The spores are spreading through these ventilation junctions, right? What if we redirect them? To where? Commander Krex demanded. Every section is populated. Not every section, Marcus pointed to a small area on the schematic. Maintenance crawl space 42B. It's connected to the ventilation system but can be sealed and accessed separately. We could draw the spores there, trap them, then neutralize them. Lieutenant Pax shook his head. That crawl space is barely a meter wide in some sections. No one could navigate it quickly enough while wearing a hazard suit. I don't need a suit, Marcus said quietly. Nyx's jaw dropped. Are you insane? Curillian spores would begin degrading your neural tissue within seconds of exposure. Marcus met her gaze steadily. Unless someone could hold their breath long enough to complete the mission. A tense silence fell over the emergency control room. How long? Commander Krex finally asked. Based on these schematics, Marcus calculated, 7 minutes. Impossible, Nyx whispered. No human can hold their breath that long while performing complex physical tasks. Marcus smiled grimly. Watch me. This is suicide, Nyx protested as she helped Marcus prepare at the maintenance crawl space entrance. The spore concentration is already at toxic levels, and you'll need to manually override 6 different junction controls. I've been in tighter spots, Marcus replied, stretching his limbs with methodical precision. Literally and figuratively. Commander Krex approached, holding a small device. Take this emergency beacon. If you become incapacitated, activate it. We'll extract you even if it means compromising the containment plan. Marcus finished stretching, waving away the device. No thanks. If I fail, stick to the original plan. Vent the affected sections. His expression hardened. The needs of the many, Commander. The Taurian nodded solemnly. Good luck, human. Marcus turned to Nyx, his eyes surprisingly bright. Hey, Professor, if this works, do I get to be in your research paper? When this fails spectacularly, I'll dedicate an entire chapter to human overconfidence, she retorted, her scales betraying her concern by shifting to a deep purple. Marcus grinned. I'll take it. Then, with startling seriousness, start the countdown when I enter. At exactly 6 minutes, initiate the ventilation reverse sequence whether I've signaled or not. Before Nyx could protest again, Marcus took several deep, rhythmic breaths, filled his lungs with one final massive inhalation, and disappeared into the crawl space. The next 7 minutes were the longest of Nyx's life. Marcus moved with unexpected speed through the narrow passages. The station's internal sensors tracked his progress as he reached the first junction and manually rewired it to redirect airflow. His movements were precise, economical, nothing wasted. 2 minutes, Lieutenant Pax announced. First junction reconfigured. Spore concentration in that area rising dramatically. He's drawing them in, Commander Krex observed. Just as planned. At 3 minutes, Marcus had reached the third junction. The life signs monitor showed his heart rate had slowed dramatically, far below normal human parameters. How is he doing that? Nyx whispered. For minutes, Lieutenant Pax called. Fourth junction reconfigured. Oxygen saturation in his bloodstream dropping to critical levels. The sensor tracking Marcus' movements suddenly froze. What happened? Commander Krex demanded. Unknown, the technician replied. We've lost his signal. Nyx felt her heart's constricting. The spores must have reached his neural tissue. 5 minutes, Lieutenant Pax announced grimly. No movement on the sensors. No communication. We need to initiate the ventilation sequence, Commander Krex said reluctantly. Wait, the sensor technician cried. Movement detected. He's at the final junction. On the screen, Marcus' life signs reappeared, impossibly weak, but present. 5 minutes, 40 seconds. The crawl space temperature sensors suddenly spiked dramatically. What's happening? Nyx demanded, leaning over the console. Temperature in the containment area rising rapidly, 600 degrees. 700 degrees. 800 degrees. How? There's no heating mechanism in that section. As if in answer, the final junction indicator turned green. The mission was complete, the spores were contained and being neutralized by intense heat. 6 minutes, 15 seconds, Lieutenant Pax announced in disbelief. Containment successful. Extract him now, Commander Krex ordered. The emergency team found Marcus unconscious but alive in the final section of crawlway. His body temperature was an impossible 44 degrees Celsius. His lungs showed signs of voluntarily collapsed alveoli, a physiological impossibility for humans. Most remarkably, his blood contained antibodies specifically targeting Curillian spores. He generated the heat internally, Dr. Trill explained in the medical bay, bewilderment evident in her voice. Somehow he raised his core temperature high enough to neutralize the spores in his immediate vicinity, creating a safe passage for himself. Impossible, Nix whispered, staring at the unconscious human. Marcus's eyes fluttered open. You really need, he rasped, his voice barely audible, a new favorite word, Professor. Nix sat in her lab, staring at the final version of her research paper. 3 weeks had passed since the Curillian spore incident. 3 weeks of questioning everything she thought she knew about humans. The station had returned to normal.